Hi, friends, this is Ian Khan, and you're listening to The Ian Khan Show. Today is a special Aftershock episode, and I'm speaking with Wolfgang Fengler, who is the World Bank's leading economist in finance, competitiveness, and innovation. He's really well published, and he's co authored Delivering Aid Differently in Africa's Economic Boom. He's also launched Population.io as well as WorldPoverty.io, two real time big data models. The German weekly Der Spiegel calls him a big data virtuoso. Let's speak with Wolfgang. Wolfgang, welcome to the Ian Khan Show. I am so excited to have you here. Wolfgang Fengler is a world-renowned economist. You work with the World Bank. Tell us about the world in a few minutes, but I want to lay down the context. You're a contributor to Aftershock, and this is a book that our good friend John Schroeder has put together. The world's top futurists have come together and they've written about the world. They've written about what tomorrow will be. But most importantly, we all are talking about Toffler. Toffler's Future Shock, 50 years after Future Shock, where the world is right now. So let's talk about the world right now. Wolfgang, tell us where you are and what is the state of the world around you?
I live in Europe. I am from Germany initially. I had the luxury to live in 4 continents, in the US, in Asia, in Indonesia, and in Africa. And then when I had the chance to go to Europe, I wanted to take it and to use that from a global experience. And we'll talk more in detail, but just in short, what people sometimes underestimate, but you and Toffler have not, is that the world is actually moving quite fast, and it's moving faster in the positive direction. And too many, unfortunately, look at the headlines and too few look at the trend lines. And if you look at the trend lines, you may sometimes see a slightly different view of the world. Maybe sometimes a bit more boring for the headliners, but actually more exciting for all of us who work in development.
So you've written extensively about, you work with data a lot. You're an economist, you work with all kinds of data, not just, data about finances and money. There's so much going on in the world. Now, in particular, you've written a lot about where are we heading with respect to longevity? Where is population heading? Where are the global population, where it's heading? The decline in the number of people who are alive every single year. You've written about disease, how it affects young children, and what are some of the bigger challenges that, humanity has on its shoulders. Tell us a little bit about that. Where are we with respect to maybe living longer or the global population? Like, how do you encapsulate that?
Excellent intro. Thank you. You and your viewers do this also at home or with your friends or at events. Just ask simple questions. One is, how many people are we in the world? I always ask them this question in my talk, and roughly 90% the answers are wrong. People will say 7 billion, which is not so wrong, but it is an old number. It's 6-7 years ago. We are now approaching 7.8 billion. That's the latest estimate. So we are soon getting towards 8 billion. So a world that those who were living at the time of Edwin Toffler were a bit scared about, but we're still there. And despite other challenges, and obviously we have many in these days, the world keeps growing and it will keep go towards 10 billion. If it will reach 10 billion or not, that's still a broader, different debate. But the main point I'd like to make is people are scared of a war of rapid population growth, but we have gone through that. And we, including you and I, we live better lives than our parents, and they live better lives than our grandparents. And that has to do because people are alive longer. That's a very good thing. So those who are scared of population growth, I would urge them to say, don't scare. And even if you don't like to be around surrounded by more people, you can't stop it anymore, because it's a very important fact people underestimate and don't understand often, unfortunately, is population growth is not driven by children. The number of children today is 2 billion. The number of children 20 years ago was 2 billion. And I'm sure you'll guess right, the number of children in 20 years will be 2 billion. It's a flat line. That means the growth we are experiencing is because of you and myself, and because of all the viewers who are above 18. It's because of people, of adults. And we don't want to stop that. Otherwise, some of us would need to commit suicide. We don't want that. So it's good that there are more adults, because people live longer. And that is a very continuous trend that started with the time that Edwin Toffler wrote Future Shock, and it will continue the next decades. And then when somebody will reach 100, will not be a surprise anymore. You may remember when you were a child, somebody that read in the newspaper, wow, there's somebody reaching 100 years. Today, I'm sure you may already know somebody, at least somebody knows somebody who has reached 100. It's not that normal. And for our children, it will be very normal then. So that's, I think, the progression we live in. So that's, I think, my big picture on global demographics. I'm happy to go a bit into the disease element and the other shifts that you just highlighted.
Thank you. I want to ask you about a few different things. And I know we can be here for days and days and days, and because this is such an interesting topic, and you're the world's most renowned world-renowned expert in talking about this. I want to talk about a concern that as people we might have is I think that people are afraid about this population growth because they feel, or we feel, that the world is not going to be enough, right? We're going to run out of food, we're going to run out of, I don't know, shelter, urban centers of cities will all of a sudden be competing with each other. And I think there's a misconception there that not everybody lives in a city like Berlin or a congested city like New York, urban centers that are vertically developed. I think there's plenty of space around in the world. We all can live really nicely and freely, have access to the resources that we need, have plenty of food. But I believe there's an imbalance of resources, whether it's finely produced foods, it's how we live. Help us understand that. Why are people at war with each other? Because at the end of the day, it's all about resources. Why are we killing each other? Why can't we get along? Because there's plenty of resources available. Isn't that right?
Well, you have great many events and podcasts, Greg, because this is, I think, the overarching question of development and human societies in general. I'll pick up on a few points you had, especially food and urbanization. I think the first thing, again, that's when we are looking around and looking at the TVs and always see the big problems. We don't balance it properly with the big opportunities and the good developments. Obviously, we do read about the COVID death in New York, rightly so, but we don't read about the fact that there may be 5,000 Vietnamese who have escaped poverty today, which is also worth a headline, but it just keeps on going and keeps on advancing. And there is probably 10,000 Vietnamese who are not hungry tonight compared to a year ago. So those are big shifts that we're not noticing. And my general plea is that we have this big picture and we highlight some of the bad things that happen, but then also look at the good things. And if you look at together, I think it's undeniable. The world is better today than it was at the year 2000. And that was better than the year 1980 or 1970 when it wrote the book. There's fewer people hungry today. There is fewer people in poverty. There is more people living more prosperous, dynamic life in the middle class, despite all the problems we have been facing. So just using this example of food that you mentioned, obviously the end of food has been predicted by others, including by Malthus, who thought that we're running out of food and we will all be in some of these apocalyptic announcements have been made by many, and they'll still be there. They have always been wrong. As the world still keeps turning, we are still feeding ourselves. And the main point is, as you said, there is enough food out there. So it's a question of how you organize it. And there is more food today than there used to ever be. And if you think of food, and you can do the same with transport, if you own a car, it's probably now standing outside, very inefficient. A car should move and you should share the car, and with driverless car, that will change. The same goes with food. If you think of the food that's being produced in some part of Brazil or Africa until it enters your plate in the evening, your dining table, it will have been a lot of wasted along the way because the logistics doesn't work properly. Some things rot in the field. There's so much more food out there that we don't eat, or that in the restaurant itself or in the supermarket it gets thrown away. If we organize everything better, there's plenty. There are probably food for 20 billion people, and will not overcome much than 10 billion. So it's not the worry is not food. The worry, as you said, is organization, and then the resulting issues that come with that. But again, important to understand that things have been better now than it had been in the past. Now, there's still conflict over resources, as you said, resource-rich countries, and I live myself in Kenya next to Somalia, which has its own deep challenges of a failed state. So that as long as there's underdevelopment and as long as there's these countries that are having major challenges, there will be conflict at a societal level, at a country level, and at other levels. But again, it's important to note, surprisingly, some may not notice, the world is still more peaceful than it was 20, 30 years ago. Lots of conflicts that have stopped now, or countries that have gone in a positive direction. I worked myself in Uzbekistan. There's a case of Ethiopia. All those countries that we don't forget a little bit in passing because we often focus a bit on the negative.
Amazing. I love it. This is so intense. Now, I have read that there is a stat that we waste about 1/3 of all the food that we produce. I think it was from the UK, the stat, that 1/3 of all the food that is produced from agriculture, from all these processes through supply chains, it's at the grocery store, it's cooked, 1/3 of it is wasted, right? So behind that, every resource that you've put, it means that resource has gone wasted. And I think there's a problem of more of efficiency. There's also the challenge that, different governments, politics, media, a lack of awareness, all of these are challenging because they do not paint the right picture. And I think if you really empower people with the right information, they build the right habits, they do the right thing every single day, I think the world will be a much, much better place with less amount of stress. And I don't think we stress upon that as much. We just are running in a panic mode. And what COVID-19 has done to this world in 2020 is put a stop at everything. It has literally halted, put big brakes on everybody and said, just stop doing what you're doing and get a reality check on life. What do you think about COVID-19?
Well, I have excellent points, Ian, you're making, and I like the way that put the brakes on the panic mode. And just to, if I may add to that, before I go to COVID-19, one issue I think that and I don't blame the extremists. They obviously have their own agendas, and it's very easy to make them noise out of data points. But also, I think that your show makes a great contribution to this. We need to make the normal news more exciting and to really have not just data scientists and economists and statisticians play with data, but everybody. We should play with data like we play with Lego. And once we can do that, then we have also, then it's much easier to debate, because often in these debates, it gets very deep into philosophical issues, but based on the wrong facts. And if the facts were just there and right and simple to follow, then we'd be much better off, which relates to COVID as well. I'm working with some teams who have done some analysis and some initial analysis, both on what it means for the economy and what it means for health, some of the two key fundamental issues. And what obviously is some of the whole underlying reason why we all had to put the brakes on and we have put it on is that concept that you talk about and many of the contributors on exponentiality. The number of ill people, even the number of dead people, despite the suffering that goes with this, is very, very low now if you compare to any other deaths. There's no daily tracking of the car accidents, of the dementia, the disease of diabetes. All things are much more dramatic. Having said that, if you have an exponential curve, then you go very quickly from 5,000 to 500,000. That's just a little more than 10 doubling. Then you are at a very large number, and that's I think why we're seeing what we have been experiencing now. But again, this comes to the core of my article in Future Shock. It's important to put things in perspective. So if assuming in a very negative scenario, 1 million deaths this year in the world would be on top of 60 million deaths. So it is important, but it's not the big killer. The big killer would be heart disease, cancer, car accidents. HIV would be in the same category as COVID. Then suicide is around the same category. So those are my plea to people out there and everybody else interested in this subject is let's do the same what we monitor, what we see with COVID on John Hopkins website every day. Let's do that with all diseases or all causes, because then you can address them much more. Obviously not every disease is a disaster, right? Eventually we'll all die, and probably it's heart disease then, so that's okay. Then I think if some casualties are on heart disease at old age, that's what will happen. But so many other diseases, especially in poorer countries, could be cured, and that would be my plea for how we convert some of the COVID interest and excitement around data into something much broader.
No, thank you so much, Wolfgang. That's very interesting. You mentioned a couple of things, and I want to build up upon that. I want to talk about the longevity as an example. So first of all, you've got. Let me backtrack a little bit. So we talked about there are many other factors, diseases, challenges, issues that we face on an everyday basis, where the rate of dying, the rate of death is much, much higher than COVID-19, right? But the amount of attention that COVID-19 has gained because of how it's progressed, the lack of effort governments have made, media, all of this. It's generally a pandemic that's given. Many people have died in 2020 because of that. And we might feel the effects of COVID-19 for the next 1-2 couple of years. I believe we're going to face the economic impact of COVID-19 for at least 5 years going from now on. All the bailouts the banks are giving, all the incentives, everything that's happening, it's going to have a cost. And that cost is going to, show itself in the next 2 to 5 years. As an economist, what's your take on the financial side of the impact that pandemic like COVID-19 creates, where it just shakes everything? It creates panic in global markets. Countries are going all into debt, and they have to reach out deep into the coffers of something else and help communities grow, help small businesses grow. What's your analysis on the impact of pandemics on business, and what's your outlook for the next 2 to 5 years?
Excellent point. point, Ian. I'm working with a team also that's connect what's called World Data Lab, and it's Brookings, Homi Karas, that does these models. And so I refer to some of this, as you mentioned. First, clearly, that's not a news to you. This is worse than the global financial crisis. And the first time, I think, since records have started, the first time what's called the global consumer class, which is basically the global middle class plus the wealthy group, is shrinking this year. So it's the first time ever. It didn't happen in a global financial crisis because Asia basically bailed out the world. So all the negative economic experience we had in Europe and the US was compensated by Asia. This time Asia is not running at the same steam anymore, but it's still going positive. So if you take the latest IMF forecast and then include it in a model that includes population growth and other variables, and you assume that things will go back to normal, as they seem to be partly in China, then Asia will still basically compensate for a small part what other continents will go through. So that's, I think, on that broad perspective. But as you say, and that's again, I think, what the similarity with the global financial crisis is, that will go up dramatically, or at least fortunately significantly. My home country, Germany, we just announced today, it will go up probably by another 10 percentage point of GDP in their medium-term projection. So those are the long-term problematic effects that you highlighted and that we have just to accept, to deal with. Now, two glimmers of hope I would have there. One is, even though the great global financial crisis was painful to many of us, it was no comparison to what our great-grandparents went through in the Great Depression. So, and I'm saying this, there is now tools, and especially from central banks, that were not tested before that actually worked quite well. They're very unconventional tools, including quantitative easing, but they help to get, in the US especially, but even also part of Europe and the rest of the world, the economy is back on track. And so there's this new financial market experience, you could say, that you can use, including social protection programs in poorer countries, a lot of more improved systems beyond the inefficiencies that we talked to. The second is, and I'm sure, I know you talk quite a bit about this in your, I think also today, your show, is around how other shifts taking place. So I think, for example, the shift in mobility will be accelerated, and we don't need a car anymore. We just need more mobility. Digital health is another one. The idea of a 9-to-5 job, which you and I gave up already, but others not yet. All of those things will change dramatically, I think, with COVID, and that will be for the better.
Thanks, Wolfgang. Thank you. Thanks so much. I know our time is limited. We just have maybe another few minutes to talk about a couple of things I want to talk about. You talk a lot about healthcare, right, in your article in Aftershock, and I want to recommend everybody grab a copy of Aftershock from wherever it's available. I think it's available on Amazon. It's money well spent because you get insights from so many 50 plus different futurists on different aspects of business life, the future. I am really loving reading this book myself. So that's what I can say. First of all, you write a lot about health. You write a lot about longevity. People will live longer. As we go on, they'll live longer. And what this happened, there's a couple of streams I want to go into. One is technology. How big of a role will technology play in this? Many futurists are talking about, humanity will reach something called an escape velocity in the next 15 to 20 years because of all the strides that technology will make, nanomedicine, nanobots, progressive medicine, and all of that. And we might just be able to expand our lifespans exponentially. I don't know how many years that will be. Do you believe in that, or do you think it's unrealistic? We're going to do a quick take on 4 or 5 different things. What's your take on that? Humanity reaching escape velocity. How do you think as an economist?
I think people underestimate how much it penetrates through the whole world. So I don't see it yet, but I see people living to the 100, and technology will help a lot, including driverless cars. Once we have that, there will be 1.5 million deaths less. And just as you use another example, if you think how healthcare is organized now, you go to tons of doctors and you repeat x-rays, and there is no AI, there is no even basic housekeeping system of a digital platform, a health platform that itself will identify health risks. We have increased awareness to Fitbits and many other things that people are using that can bring mortality, as I put in the book, mortality down below 65 to 0. I think that would be a great achievement, and that is, in my view, more important than escape velocity.
Perfect. Now, what about people going beyond being stuck in circumstances? We see many people are suffering right now in COVID-19. It's something they haven't been able to control. It's something that's happened to us. What can people do to live a better life, to unlock their potential, whether it's, looking at new careers? What opportunities does the world present from an economic perspective as we go into the future? How do you see people's life changing financially, a better quality of life? What can you share? What should we do?
Big question, Ian. Maybe just let me highlight two aspects. Obviously, one an area you are very active in. It's all about relationships, and it's actually much easier to build relationships today. There's other challenges with the isolation if you're just stuck with your computer as a teenager or older. But it's much easier now, as we do now, connect virtually. You can connect with your elderly family member virtually. All of this reduces actually isolation. That I remember how my grandmother herself was isolated. So that itself is, you can just have many more opportunities for people to contribute thanks to technology, which led it to your previous question. The second, on a broader macroeconomic perspective, business, and again, if you look at the long-term trend, and you just look this one key number metric I'm watching, the middle class in the world, used to be growing 4 people per second. Now it's down to close to 0, but it's not negative, and it keeps going up to 4 people per second next year if we can see the recovery. That's a lot of people over 10, 20, 30 years. We moved from basically 2 billion people in the middle class in 2000 to 5 billion in 2030. That's a huge business opportunity. It's a huge wealth gainer. But it needs to have a mindset, a business mindset that is not as grandiose in selling luxury stuff to some billionaires and selling them yachts or any other type of luxury good, but it's more, the power of the masses, and they benefit from it. You benefit as a business, but you need to think of a much larger market in countries you have not maybe worked yet.
Yeah, one of the examples that I can think of is Alibaba. That the founder Jack Ma always says that, hey, I'm going to serve the mom and pop stores. I'm going to serve people who are not online. And I think by doing that in China, Alibaba really had a tremendous amount of growth when they started about 20 years ago. And so that makes perfect sense. There's, you say it's going to be 5 billion people in the middle class by 2030, and adding a value to those people, doing something for them, helping them do something better or different, or creating value for them. I think that's the way you can look at becoming financially independent, growth, serving others. That's really, I really align with that. I really, 100% agree with you. Also, in 2020, we've had COVID-19, and everybody's been talking about social distancing, which was the wrong message, I think, people sent in the beginning, rather than physical distancing, right? Social distancing means people are unfriendly. And it happened to me. People became very unfriendly. You go to the grocery store and people are just looking at you in a strange way, and people are rude at you. I'm like, whoa, something is happening that hasn't happened before. And I think we have to constantly educate people and go out there and tell them, hey, this is right and this is wrong. And I think educators among today's era are potentially so much needed to go out there and help people understand what they should do and what they shouldn't do. The work that you do as an educator, I love your article here and all the people who have contributed to Aftershock. There's so much inside there that if we distill it down, drink it up, I think you could be just a rock star. You could do anything. And thank you so much for being part of this. I'm honored to be in the list, just like you, with people like yourself. I know we're heading to the end of our time. I want to ask you your advice to potentially readers of Future Shock, readers of Aftershock, people who are out there, students, young generation, people whose careers have been stalled because of COVID-19. Where does the path go? Give us top 3 things we should do right now. It could be anything. What should we do to create a better future?
Well, number one is what you and your readers may already do. Watch this show, go to a very diverse set of people, but just, be open-minded. Obviously, as you grow older, it may become more difficult, but if you're younger, all of us trying that. So I was often wrong in my life, and so it's good to challenge yourself and question. The second is, you don't have to be a math whiz, but it's just very important to go down to the numbers. And often you see some disconnect in the numbers, and it's not so complicated as some economists may make it appear. And what I'm trying to do, and other things I do, just break it down always to the key numbers, right? The key number in the world is 7.7 billion, soon 7.8. There's a certain number for Pakistan, a certain number for the US, a number for Germany. The number is 80 million for Germany, and you can break it down further. It is not complicated to then break and add it up together. And sometimes when you add it up together, you see, there's some disconnect. This guy is double counting the COVID casualties in this county from this county. So that itself will create new insights, and you can almost become an expert. But then the other point that you made before is, don't do social distancing, do physical distancing. This is the nice beauty of humanity. In balance, people have more time now. They can do their jobs more efficiently on balance and have more opportunities, including the lower middle class and Asian other economies, much better off than their parents. And they then actually want to use that time. And the best time to use is sometimes with yourself, reading and writing, but often with others. They can be across the world. They can can be across the village, that can be just across the fence. But thanks to new technologies, we have the opportunity to connect with so many people we have never done before.
Thank you, Wolfgang. So 3 things, educate yourself as much as you can from different sources, books, podcasts, TV shows, not necessarily entertainment, but educate yourself on what's happening in the world. Read a book, 1 or 2 books every week, every month if you can. Number 2, pay attention to data, pay attention to numbers, try and understand what they are. There are so many free resources right now to be able to dip your toes deeper, whether it's free courses with Coursera or some online education platform, but you can learn numbers better and understand them better. And number 3, communicate with others, build relationships. And you've shared so many different things, but relationships are everything in today's era, and they will continue to be as long as we are human. Wolfgang, thank you so much for your time. Everybody, please grab a copy of Aftershock whenever you can. Wolfgang, I cannot thank you enough. Thank you for jumping on my podcast. You take care. Auf Wiedersehen. Dankeschön. And we will catch you another time, hopefully, and have another conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Vielen Dank, Ian. Have a great time.
You're
Thanks.
welcome. Thank you.
Bye.
Wolfgang, thanks so much. Hey friend, this is Ian Khan. If you liked what you saw on my video, then please subscribe to my YouTube channel and be inspired every single day with innovative content that keeps you fresh, updated, and ready for the future. For more information, also visit my website at iankhan.com.